This information series about Tantra is brought to you by Not a Profit Org, the place on the internet to find spiritual guidance powered by artificial intelligence. Chakrapuja, worship with the panchatattva, generally takes place in an assembly called a chakra, which is composed of men, sadhaka, and women, shakti, or Bhairava and Bhairavi. The worshippers sit in a circle, chakra, men and women alternately, the shakti sitting on the left of the sadhaka. The lord of the chakra, chakrasvaman, or chakreshvara, sits with his shakti in the center, where the wine, jar and other articles used in the worship are kept. During the chakra all eat, drink, and worship together, there being no distinction of caste. No pashus should, however, be introduced. There are various kinds of chakra, such as the vira, raja, diva, maha chakras productive, it is said, of various fruits for the participators therein. Chapter VI of the Mahanirvana Tantra deals with the panchatattva, and chapter Roman 8 gives an account of the Bhairavi and Tattva, or Divya, chakras. The latter is for worshippers of the Brahma mantra, yoga. This word, derived from the root yuj, to join, is in grammar sandhi, in logic avyava shakti, or the power of the parts taken together, and in its most widely known and present sense, the union of the jiva, or embodied spirit, with the Paramatma, or supreme spirit, and the practices by which this union may be attained. There is a natural yoga in which all beings are, for it is only by virtue of this identity, in fact, that they exist. This position is common ground, though in practice too frequently overlooked. Primus modus unionis est, quo Deus, ration sui immensitatis est, in omnibus rebus per essentiam, presentiam et potentiam. Per essentiam ut dans omnibus es. Per presentiam ut omnia prospicions. Per potentiam ut de omnibus disponens. The mystical theologian cited, however, proceeds to say, sed hic unio animi cum Dio est generalis, communis omnibus et ordinis naturalis, illa namp de qua loquimer est ordinis supernaturali, actualis et fructiva. It is of this special yoga, though not in reality more supernatural than the first, that we here deal. Yoga in its technical sense is the realization of this identity, which exists, though it is not known, by the destruction of the false appearance of separation. There is no bond equal in strength, maya, and no force greater to destroy that bond than yoga. There is no better friend than knowledge, jnana, nor worse enemy than egoism, ahankara. As to learn the Shastra one must learn the alphabet, so yoga is necessary for the acquirement of tattvajnana truth. The animal body is the result of action, and from the body flows action, the process being compared to the seesaw movement of a gatiyantra, or water lifter. Through their actions beings continually go from birth to death. The complete attainment of the fruit of yoga is lasting and unchanging life in the nominal world of the Absolute. Yoga is variously named according to the methods employed, but the two main divisions are those of the Hathayoga, or Gatishtha-yoga, and Samadhi-yoga, of which rajayoga is one of the forms. Hathayoga is commonly misunderstood, both in its definition and aim being frequently identified with exaggerated forms of self-mortification. The Garandasang Hita well defines it to be the means whereby the excellent rajayoga is attained. Actual union is not the result of Hathayoga alone, which is concerned with certain physical processes preparatory or auxiliary to the control of the mind, by which alone union may be directly attained. It is, however, not meant that all the processes of Hathayoga here or in the books described are necessary for the attainment of rajayoga. What is necessary must be determined according to the circumstances of each particular case. What is suited or necessary in one case may not be so for another. A peculiar feature of Tantrika Virachara is the union of the sadhaka and his shakti in lata sadhana. This is a process which is expressly forbidden to pashus by the same tantras which prescribe it for the vira. The union of Shiva and Shakti in the higher sadhana is different in form, being the union of the Kundalini Shakti of the Muladhara with the Vindu which is upon the Sahasrara. This process, called the piercing of the sixth chakra, is described later on in a separate paragraph. Though, however, all Hathayoga processes are not necessary, some, at least, are generally considered to be so. Thus, in the well-known Ashtangayoga, 8-limbed yoga, of which samadhi is the highest end, the physical conditions and processes known as asana and pranayama vide post are prescribed. This yoga prescribes 5 exterior Vairanga methods for the subjugation of the body, namely yama, forbearance or self-control, such as sexual continence, avoidance of harm to others, ahimsa, kindness, forgiveness, the doing of good without desire for reward, absence of covetousness, temperance, purity of mind and body, etc. Niyama, religious observances, charity, austerities, reading of the Shastra and Ishvara pranadhana, persevering devotion to the Lord. Asana, seated positions or postures, vide post, pranayama, regulation of the breath. A yogi renders the vital airs equable and consciously produces the state of respiration which is favorable for mental concentration, as others do it occasionally and unconsciously, vide post. Pratyahara, restraint of the senses, which follow in the path of the other 4 processes which deal with the subjugation of the body. There are then 3 interior yoganga methods for the subjugation of the mind, namely dharana, attention, steadying of the mind, the fixing of the internal organ, chitta, in the particular manner indicated in the works on yoga, dhyana, or the uniform, continuous contemplation of the object of thought, and that samadhi which is called samadhi. Samadhi is a deeper and more intense contemplation on the self to the exclusion of all other objects, and constituting trance or ecstasy. This ecstasy is perfected to the stage of the removal of the slightest trace of the distinction of subject and object in nirvikalpasamadhi, in which there is complete union with the Paramatma, or divine spirit, by virajya dispassion, and keeping the mind in its unmodified state, yoga is attained. This knowledge, ahang brahmasmi, I am the Brahman, does not produce liberation moksha, but is liberation itself, whether yoga is spoken of as the union of Kula Kundalini with Parama Shiva, or the union of the individual soul, jivatma, with the Supreme Soul, Paramatma, or as the state of mind in which all outward thought is suppressed, or as the controlling or suppression of the thinking faculty, chittavritti, or as the union of the moon and the sun, Ida and Pingala, prana and apana, nada and vindu. The meaning and the end are in each case the same. Yoga, in seeking mental control and concentration, makes use of certain preliminary physical processes, sadhana, such as the shatkarmma, asana, mudra, and pranayama. By these 4 processes and 3 mental acts, 7 qualities, known as shidhana, dridhata, estharata, dharya, laghava, pratyaksha, nirliptattva vide post, are acquired. Shidhana, shatkarmma, the first or cleansing, is effected by the 6 processes known as the shatkarmma. Of these, the first is dhati or washing, which is fourfold or inward washing antared, dhati, cleansing of the teeth, etc., dantadhati of the heart, hridati, and of the rectum, muladhati. Antardhati is also fourfold, namely, vadasara, by which air is drawn into the belly and then expelled, varasara, by which the body is filled with water, which is then evacuated by the anus, vanasara, in which the nabhi granth is made to touch the spinal column meru, and vahishkrita, in which the belly is by kakana mudra filled with air, which is retained half a yama, and then sent downward. Dantadhati is fourfold, consisting in the cleansing of the root of the teeth and tongue, the ears, and the hollow of the forehead, capillarandra. By hridati, phlegm and bile are removed. This is done by a stick, dandadhati, or cloth, vasadhati, pushed into the throat, or swallowed, or by vomiting, vamanadhati. Mudadhati is done to cleanse the exit of the apanavayu, either with the middle finger and water, or the stalk of a turmeric plant. Vasti, the second of the shatkarmma, is twofold, and is either of the dry shuska or watery jala kind. In the second form, the yogi sits in the utkatasana posture in water up to the navel, and the anus is contracted and expanded by Ashvini mudra, or the same is done in the Paschimottanasana, and the abdomen below the navel is gently moved. In neti, the nostrils are cleansed with a piece of string. Lalaki is the whirling of the belly from side to side. In Trataka, the yogi, without winking, gazes at some minute object until the tears start from his eyes. By this the celestial vision, Divya Drishti, so often referred to in the Tantrika Upasana, is acquired. Kapalabhati is a process for the removal of phlegm and is threefold: vatakrama by inhalation and exhalation, utkrama by water drawn through the nostrils and ejected through the mouth, and shitkrama, the reverse process. These are the various processes by which the body is cleansed and made pure for the yoga practice to follow. Dridhata asana, dridhata, or strength or firmness, the acquisition of which is the second of the above-mentioned processes, is attained by asana. Asana are postures of the body. The term is generally described as modes of seating the body. But the posture is not necessarily a sitting one, for some asana are done on the belly, back, hands, etc. It is said that the asana are as numerous as living beings, and that there are 8, 4, 100, 0, 0 of these, 1, 6, 100 are declared to be excellent, and out of these 30, 2 are auspicious for men, which are described in detail. 2 of the commonest of these are Muktapadmasana, the loosened lotus seat, the ordinary position for worship, and Badapadmasana. Patanjali, on the subject of asana, merely points out what are good conditions, leaving each one to settle the details for himself according to his own requirements. There are certain other asana which are peculiar to the Tantras, such as Mundasana, Chittasana, and Shavasana, in which skulls, the funeral pyre, and a corpse respectively form the seat of sadhaka. These, though they may have other ritual objects, form part of the discipline for the conquest of fear and the attainment of indifference, which is the quality of a yoga. And so the Tantras priests describe as the scene of such rites the solitary mountain top, the lonely empty house and river side, and the cremation ground. The interior cremation ground is there where the kamic body and its passions are consumed in the fire of knowledge. Esthirata mudra, esthirata or fortitude, is acquired by the practice of the mudra. The mudra dealt with in works of Hathayoga are positions of the body. They are gymnastic, health, giving, and destructive of disease and of death, such as the Jaladhara and other mudra. They also preserve from injury by fire, water, or air. Bodily action and the health resulting therefrom react upon the mind, and by the union of a perfect mind and body siddh, is by their means attained. The Garanda Sanghita describes a number of mudra, of which those of importance may be selected. In the celebrated Jnana mudra, the yogi in Siddhasana stops with his fingers the ears, eyes, nostrils, and mouth. He inhales pranavayu by Kakina mudra and unites it with a panavayu. Meditating in their order upon the 6th chakra, he arouses the sleeping Kulakundalini by the mantra Hung Hangsa, and raises her to the Sahasrara. Then, deeming himself pervaded with the Shakti, and in blissful union Sangama with Shiva, he meditates upon himself, as by reason of that union bliss itself, and the Brahman. Ashvina mudra consists of the repeated contraction and expansion of the anus for the purpose of Shadhana, or of contraction to restrain the apana in Shatchakra-bheda. Shaktachalana employs the latter mudra, which is repeated until Vayu manifests in the Sushumna. The process is accompanied by inhalation and the union of prana and apana whilst in Siddhasana. Dharya pratyahara. Dharya, or steadiness, is produced by pratyahara. Pratyahara is the restraint of the senses, the freeing of the mind from all distractions, and the keeping of it under the control of the Atma. The mind is withdrawn from whatsoever direction it may tend by the dominant and directing self. Pratyahara destroys the 6 sins. Laghava pranayama, from pranayama Q, V, arises laghava, lightness. All beings say the ajapa gayatri, which is the expulsion of the breath by hankara, and its inspiration by sakara, 21,600 times a day. Ordinarily, the breath goes forth a distance of 12 fingers' breadth, but in singing, eating, walking, sleeping, coition, the distances are 16, 20, 24, 30, and 36 breaths respectively. In violent exercise, these distances are exceeded, the greatest distance being 96 breaths. Where the breathing is under the normal distance, life is prolonged. Where it is above that, it is shortened. Puraka is inspiration, and Richaka expiration. Kumbhaka is the retention of breath between these two movements. Kumbhaka is, according to the Garanda Sanghita of 8 kinds, Sahita, Suryabheda, Ajjayi, Shitali, Bastrika, Brahmari, Murchha, and Kavali. Pranayama similarly varies. Pranayama is the control of the breath and other vital airs. It awakens Shakti, frees from disease, produces detachment from the world, and bliss. It is of varying values, being the best Atama where the measure is 20, middling Madhyama when at 16 it produces spinal tremor, and inferior Adhama when at 12 it induces perspiration. It is necessary that the nadi should be cleansed, for air does not enter those which are impure. The cleansing of the nadi shud, is either samau or nirman, that is with or without the use of vija. According to the first form, the yogi in Padmasana does Guruniyasa according to the directions of the Guru. Meditating on yang, he does japa through ida of the vija 16 times, kumbhaka with japa of vija 64 times, and then exhalation through the solar nadi and japa of vija 32 times. Fire is raised from Manipura and united with Prithivi. Then follows inhalation by the solar nadu with the Vani Vija 16 times, Kumbhaka with 64 japa of the Vija, followed by exhalation through the lunar nadi and japa of the Vija 32 times. He then meditates on the lunar brilliance, gazing at the tip of the nose, and inhales by ida with japa of the Vija, Thang, 16 times. Kumbhaka is done with the Vija Vang 64 times. He then thinks of himself as flooded by nectar and considers that the nadi have been washed. He exhales by Pingala with 32 japa of the Vija Lang and considers himself thereby as strengthened. He then takes a seat on a mat of kasha grass, a deerskin, etc., and, facing east or north, does pranayama. For its exercise there must be, in addition to nadi shuddhi, consideration of proper place, time, and food. Thus the place should not be so distant as to induce anxiety, nor in an unprotected place, such as a forest, nor in a city or crowded locality, which induces distraction. Food should be pure and of a vegetarian character. It should not be too hot or too cold, pungent, sour, salt, or bitter. Fasting, the taking of 1 meal a day, and the like, are prohibited. On the contrary, the yogi should not remain without food for more than 1 yama 3 hours. The food taken should be light and strengthening. Long walks and other violent exercise should be avoided, as also only in the case of beginners' sexual intercourse. The stomach should only be half filled. Yoga should be commenced, it is said, in spring or autumn. As stated, the forms of pranayama vary. Thus Sahita, which is either with sagarbha or without nirgarbh, havija, is according to the former form as follows. The sadhaka meditates on Vidhai Brahma, who is full of rajaguna, red in color, and the image of Akara. He inhales by ida in 6 measures matra. Before Kumbhaka he does the Udayana band, a mudra. Meditating on Hari Vishnu as Satvamaya and the black Vija Yukara, he does Kumbhaka with 64 japa of the Vija. Then, meditating on Shiva as Tamamaya and his white Vija Makara, he exhales through Pingala with 32 japa of the Vija. Then, inhaling by Pingala, he does Kumbhaka and exhales by ida with the same Vija. The process is repeated in the normal and reversed order. Pratyaksha, dhyana. Through dhyana is gained the third quality of realization or pratyaksha. Dhyana, or meditation, is of 3 kinds, asthula, or gross, jayati, sukshma, or subtle. In the first, the form of the devata is brought before the mind. One form of dhyana for this purpose is as follows. Let the sadhana think of the great ocean of nectar in his heart. In the middle of that ocean is the island of gems, the shores of which are made of powdered gems. The island is clothed with a kadamba forest in yellow blossom. This forest is surrounded by malati, champaka, parijata, and other fragrant trees. In the midst of the kadamba forest there rises the beautiful kalpa tree, laden with fresh blossom and fruit. Amidst its leaves the black bees hum, and the coal birds make love. Its 4 branches are the 4 Vedas. Under the tree there is a great mandapa of precious stones, and within it a beautiful bed, on which let him picture to himself his Ishtadvata. The Guru will direct him as to the form, raiment, vahana, and the title of the Devata. Jayaturdhyana is the infusion of fire and life tejas into the form so imagined. In the Muladhara lies the snake, like Kundalini. There the Jivatma, as it were the tapering flame of a candle, dwells. The sadhaka then meditates upon the Tejamaya Brahman, or, alternatively, between the eyebrows on Pranavatmaka, the flame emitting its luster. Sukshma dhyana is meditation on Kundalini with sham, Bhavi mudra after she has been roused. By this yoga vide post, the Atma is revealed Atma Sakshatkara. Nirliptattva Samadhi. Lastly, through Samadhi the quality of Nirliptattva, or detachment, and thereafter mukti liberation is attained. Samadhi considered as a process is intense mental concentration, with freedom from all sankalpa, and attachment to the world, and all sense of mineness, or self, interest mamata. Considered as the result of such process, it is the union of jiva with the Paramatma, forms of Samadhi yoga. This Samadhi yoga is, according to the Garanda Sanghita, of 6 kinds. Dhyana Samadhi, attained by Shambhavi mudra, in which, after meditation on the Vindu, Brahman and realization of the Atma Pratyaksha, the latter is resolved into the Mahakasha. Rajayoga, attained by Kichari mudra, in which the frenum of the tongue is cut, and the latter is lengthened until it reaches the space between the eyebrows, and is then introduced in a reversed position into the mouth. Rasinandayoga, attained by Kumbhaka, in which the sadhaka in a silent place closes both ears and does puraka, and Kumbhaka until he hears the word nada in sounds varying in strength from that of the cricket's chirp to that of the large kettle drum. By daily practice the anahata sound is heard, and the jayati with the manas therein is seen, which is ultimately dissolved in the Supreme Vishnu. Layasiddhi Yoga, accomplished by the celebrated Yana Mudra already described. The sadhaka, thinking of himself as Shakti and the Paramatma as Purusha, feels himself in union Sangama with Shiva, and enjoys with him the bliss which is Shringara Rasa, and becomes bliss itself. Or the Brahman, Bhakti Yoga, in which meditation is made on the Ishtadvata with devotion bhakti, until with tears flowing from the excess of bliss, the ecstatic condition is attained. Rajayoga, accomplished by aid of the mana-merch, Kumbhaka. Here the manas detached from all worldly objects is fixed between the eyebrows in the Ajna chakra, and Kumbhaka is done. By the union of the manas with the Atma, in which the Jnani sees all things, Rajayogasamad, he is attained. Shatchakra-bheda, the piercing of the 6th chakra, is one of the most important subjects dealt with in the Tantras, and is part of the practical yoga process of which they treat. Details of practice can only be learnt from a guru, but generally it may be said that the particular is raised to the universal life, which as chit is realizable only in the sahasrara in the following manner: the jivatma in the subtle body, the receptacle of the 5 vital airs pancha-prana, mind in its 3 aspects of manas, ahankara, and buddhi, the 5 organs of action, panchakarmandriya, and the 5 organs of perception, panchajnanandriya, is united with the Kula-kundalini. The Kandarpa, or Kama Vayu in the Muladhara, a form of the Apana Vayu, is given a leftward revolution, and the fire which is round Kundalini is kindled. By the Vija hung, and the heat of the fire thus kindled, the coiled and sleeping Kundalini is wakened. She who lay asleep around Svayambhulinga, with her coils 3 circles and a half closing the entrance of the Brahman, Ivara, will, on being roused, enter that door and move upwards, united with Jivatma. On this upward movement, Brahma, Savitri, Dakinashakti, the Devas, Vija, and Vritti are dissolved in the body of Kundalini. The Mahamandala, or Prithvi, is converted into the Vija, Lang, and is also merged in her body. When Kundalini leaves the Muladhara, that lotus which, on the awakening of Kundalini, had opened and turned its flower upwards, again closes and hangs downwards. As Kundalini reaches the Svadhish, Dhyana chakra, that lotus opens out and lifts its flower upwards. Upon the entrance of Kundalini, Mahavishnu, Mahalakshmi, Sarasvati, Rakini Shakti, Diva, Matrikas and Vritti, Vaikunthadhama, Golaka, and the Deva and Divi residing therein are dissolved in the body of Kundalini. The Prithvi, or earth Vija Lang, is dissolved in a Pas, and a Pas converted into the Vija Vang remains in the body of Kundalini. When the Divi reaches the Manipura chakra, all that is in the chakra merges in her body. The Varuna Vija Vang is dissolved in fire, which remains in the body of the Divi as the Vija Rang. This chakra is called the Brahma Granth, thigh or knot of Brahma. The piercing of this chakra may involve considerable pain, physical disorder, and even disease. On this account, the directions of an experienced guru are necessary, and therefore also other modes of yoga have been recommended for those to whom they are applicable, for in such modes activity is provoked directly in the higher center, and it is not necessary that the lower chakras should be pierced. Kundalini next reaches the Anahata chakra, where all which is therein is merged in her. The Vija of Tejas, Rang, disappears in Vayu, and Vayu, converted into its Vija, Yang, merges into the body of Kundalini. This chakra is known as Vishnu Granth, thigh knot of Vishnu. Kundalini then ascends to the abode of Bharati or Sarasvati or the Vishuddha chakra. Upon her entrance, Ardhanarish, Vara Shiva, Shakini, the 16 vowels, mantra, etc., are dissolved in the body of Kundalini. The Vija of Vayu, Yang, is dissolved in Akasha, which itself being transformed into the Vija, Hang, is merged in the body of Kundalini. Piercing the Lalana chakra, the Divi reaches the Ajna chakra, where Parama Shiva, Siddha Kali, the Diva, Guna, and all else therein are absorbed into her body. The Vija of Akasha, Hang, is merged in the Manas chakra, and mind itself in the body of Kundalini. The Ajna chakra is known as Rudragran, thigh or knot of Rudra or Shiva. After this chakra has been pierced, Kundalini of her own motion unites with Parama Shiva. As she proceeds upwards from the two petaled lotus, the Niralamba Puri, Pranava, Nada, etc., are merged in her. The Kundalini has then in her progress upwards absorbed in herself the 24 tattva, commencing with the gross elements, and then unites herself and becomes one with Parama Shiva. This is the Maithuna coition of the Sattvika, panchatattva. The nectar which flows from such union floods the Keshad or human body. It is then that the sadhaka, forgetful of all in this world, is immersed in ineffable bliss. Thereafter the sadhaka, thinking of the Vayu Vija, Yang, as being in the left nostril, inhales through Ida, making japa of the Vija 16 times. Then, closing both nostrils, he makes japa of the Vija 4 times. He then thinks that the black man of sin, Papapurusha, in the left cavity of the abdomen, is being dried up by air, and so thinking he exhales through the right nostril Pingala, making japa of Vija 2 times. The sadhaka then meditating upon the red, colored Vija, Rang, in the Manipura inhales, making 16 japa of the Vija, and then closes the nostrils, making 16 japa. While making the japa, he thinks that the body of the man of sin is being burnt and reduced to ashes by fire. He then exhales through the right nostril with 32 japa. He then meditates upon the white Chandra Vija thang. He next inhales through Ida, making japa of the Vija 16 times, closes both nostrils with japa done 64 times, and exhales through Pingala with 32 japa. During inhalation, holding of breath, and exhalation, he should consider that a new celestial body is being formed by the nectar, composed of all the letters of the alphabet, Matrikavarna, dropping from the moon. In a similar way with the Vija Vang, the formation of the body is continued, and with the Vija Lang, it is completed and strengthened. Lastly, with the mantra Sahang, the sadhaka leads the jivatma into the heart. Thus Kundalini, who has enjoyed her union with Parama Shiva, sets out on her return journey the way she came. As she passes through each of the chakra, all that she has absorbed therefrom come out from herself and take their several places in the chakra. In this manner she again reaches the Muladhara, when all that is described to be in the chakras, CPP, LVA, LZI are in the positions which they occupied before her awakening. The Guru's instructions are to go above the Ajna chakra, but no special directions are given. For after this chakra has been pierced, the sadhaka can reach the Brahmasthana unaided. Below the 7th month of Shiva, the relationship of Guru and Sishya ceases. The instructions of the 7th Amnaya is not expressed aprakashita. Sin and virtue. According to Christian conceptions, sin is a violation of the personal will of, and apostasy from, God. The flesh is the source of lusts which oppose God's commands, and in this lies its positive significance for the origin of a bias of life against God. According to St. Thomas, in the original state, no longer held as the normal, the lower powers were subordinate to reason, and reason subject to God. Original sin is formally a defect of original righteousness, and materially concupiscence, as St. Paul says Romans 7, 8-14, the pneumatic law, which declares war on the lusts, meets with opposition from the law in the members. These and similar notions involve a religious and moral conscious judgment, which is assumed to exist in humanity alone. Hindu notions of papa, wrong, and punya, that which is pure, holy, and right, have a wider content. The latter is accordance and working with the will of Ishvara, of whom the jiva is itself the embodiment, as manifested at any particular time in the general direction taken by the cosmic process. As the former is the contrary, the two terms are relative to the state of evolution and the surrounding circumstances of the jiva to which they are applied. Thus, the impulse towards individuality, which is necessary and just on the path of inclination or going forth, pravritti marga, is wrongful as a hindrance to the attainment of unity, which is the goal of the path of return, nivritti marga, where inclinations should cease. In short, what makes for progress on the one path is a hindrance on the other. The matter, when rightly understood, is not except perhaps sometimes popularly viewed from the juristic standpoint of an external lawgiver, his commands, and those subject to it, but from that in which the exemplification of the moral law is regarded as the true and proper expression of the jiva's own evolution. Morality, it has been said, is the true nature of a being. For the same reason wrong is its destruction. What the jiva actually does is the result of his karma. Further, the term jiva, though commonly applicable to the human embodiment of the Atma, is not limited to it. Both papa and punya may therefore be manifested in beings of a lower rank than that of humanity, in so far as what they whether consciously or unconsciously do is a hindrance to their development. Thus, in the Yoga Vashishtha, it is said that even a creeping plant acquired merit by association with the holy Muni on whose dwelling it grew. Objectively considered, sin is concisely defined as dukkhajanakam papam. It is that which has been, is, and will be the cause of pain, mental or physical, in past, present, and future births. The pain, as the consequence of the action done, need not be immediate. Though, however, the suffering may be experienced as a result later than the action of which it is the cause, the consequence of the action is not really something separate, but a part of the action itself, namely, that part of it which belongs to the future. The 6 chief sins are kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya, lust, anger, covetousness, ignorance or delusion, pride and envy. All wrong is at base self, seeking, in ignorance or disregard of the unity of the self in all creatures. Virtue punya, therefore, as the contrary of sin, is that which is the cause of happiness, sakhajanakam punyam. That happiness is produced either in this or future births, or leads to the enjoyment of heaven, svarga. Virtue is that which leads towards the unity, whose substance is bliss ananda,
This good karma produces pleasant fruit, which, like all the results of karma, is transitory. As Shruti says, it is not by acts or the pindas offered by one's children or by wealth, but by renunciation that men have attained liberation.
It is only by escape from karma through knowledge that the jiva, becoming one with the unchanging absolute, attains lasting rest. It is obvious that for those who obtain such release, neither vice nor virtue, which are categories of phenomenal being, exist. Karma is action, its cause and effect. There is no uncaused action, nor action without effect. The past, the present, and the future are linked together as one whole. The Iksha, Jnana, and Kriya Shakti manifest in the Jivatma, living on the worldly plane as desire, knowledge, and action.
As the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, a man is verily formed of desire. As is his desire, so is his thought. As is his thought, so is his action. As is his action, so is his attainment. These fashion the individual's karma. He who desires goes by work to the object on which his mind is set. As he thinks, so he becometh.
Then, as to action, whatsoever a man sows, that shall he reap. The matter is not one of punishment and reward, but of consequence, and the consequence of action is but a part of it.
If anything is caused, its result is caused. The result being part of the original action, why continues and is transformed into the result.
The Jivatma experiences happiness for his good acts and misery for his evil ones. Karma is of three kinds, viz. Sanchita karma, that is, the whole vast accumulated mass of the unexhausted karma of the past, whether good or bad, which has still to be worked out. This past karma is the cause of the character of the succeeding births, and, as such, is called samskara, or vasana. The second form of karma is prarabdha, or that part of the first which is ripe, and which is worked out and bears fruit in the present birth.
The third is the new karma, which man is continually making by his present and future actions, and is called vartamana and agami.
The embodied soul, Jivatma, whilst in the samsara, or phenomenal world, is by its nature ever making present karma and experiencing the past.
Even the devas themselves are subject to time and karma. By his karma, a jiva may become an Indra.
Karma is thus the invisible adrishta, the product of ordained or prohibited actions capable of giving bodies. It is either good or bad, and together these are called the impurity of action karma mala. Even good action, when done with a view to its fruit, can never secure liberation. Those who think of the reward will receive benefit in the shape of that reward. Liberation is the work of Shiva Shakti, and is gained only by Brahmajnana, the destruction of the will to separate life, and realization of unity with the Supreme.
All accompanying action must be without thought of self. With the cessation of desire, the tie which binds man to the samsara is broken. According to the Tantra, the sadhana and achara q.v. appropriate to an individual depends upon his karma. A man's tendencies, character, and temperament is molded by his sanchita karma. As regards prarabdha karma, it is unavoidable. Nothing can be done but to work it out. Some systems prescribe the same method for men of diverse tendencies. But the Tantra recognizes the force of karma and molds its method to the temperament produced by it. The needs of each vary, as also the methods which will be the best suited to each to lead them to the common goal. Thus, forms of worship which are permissible to the vira are forbidden to the pashu. The guru must determine that for which the sadhaka is qualified adhikara. For aims of being, there is but one thing which all seek happiness, though it be of differing kinds, and sought in different ways. All forms, whether sensual, intellectual, or spiritual, are from the Brahman, who is itself the source and essence of all bliss, and bliss itself rasavai sa. Though issuing from the same source, pleasure differs in its forms in being higher and lower, transitory or durable, or permanent. Those on the path of desire, pravritti marga, seek it through the enjoyments of this world, bhakti, or in the more durable, though still impermanent delights of heaven, svarga. He who is on the path of return, nivritti marga, seeks happiness,
not in the created worlds, but in everlasting union with their primal source, Mukti, and thus it is said that man can never be truly
happy until he seeks shelter with Brahman, which is itself the great bliss rasam hayavayam labd, va anandi bhavati. The eternal rhythm of the divine breath is outwards from spirit to matter, and inwards from matter to spirit. Divi as Mayur evolves the world, as Mahamaya she recalls it to herself. The path of outgoing is the way of pravritti, that of return nivritti. Each of these movements is divine. Enjoyment, bhakti, and liberation, mukti, are each her gifts. And in the third chapter of the work cited, it is said that of Vishnu and Shiva mukti only can be had, but of Divi both bhakti and mukti, and this is so in so far as the Divi is, in a peculiar sense, the source whence those material things come from which enjoyment, bhoga, arises. All jiva on their way to humanity, and the bulk of humanity itself, is on the forward path, and rightly seeks the enjoyment which is appropriate to its stage of evolution. The thirst for life will continue to manifest itself until the point of return is reached, and the outgoing energy is exhausted. Man must, until such time, remain on the path of desire. In the hands of Divi is the noose of desire. Divi herself is both desire, and that light of knowledge, which in the wise who have known enjoyment, lays bare its futilities. But one cannot renounce until one has enjoyed, and so of the world. Process itself, it is said, that the unborn ones, the Purushas, are both subservient to her Prakriti, and leave her by reason of Viveka. Provision is made for the worldly life which is the outgoing of the Supreme. And so it is said that the Tantrika has both enjoyment bhakti and liberation mukti. But enjoyment itself is not without its law. Desire is not to be let loose without bridle. The mental self is, as is commonly said, the charioteer of the body, of which the senses are the horses. Contrary to mistaken notions on the subject, the Tantras take no exception to the ordinary rule that it is necessary not to let them run away. If one would not be swept away and lost in the mighty force which is the descent into matter, thought and action must be controlled by dharma. Hence the first three of the aims of life, trivarga on the path of pravritti, are dharma, artha, and kama.